Lucas Marshall was a wealthy, confident, and deeply competitive man, always used to winning in both business and life. His success fueled his arrogance, and he thrived on challenges that pushed his limits. One evening, at an extravagant New York party, his close friend Jack decided to test Lucas's bravado with a bet that would forever change his life. Jack smirked, his voice dripping with mischief as he leaned in. "Let's see if you can win this one, Lucas. I bet you wouldn't dare marry a woman who doesn't fit your usual type." Lucas, known for dating stunning, high-profile women, raised an eyebrow in curiosity. The idea caught him off guard, but his competitive nature refused to back down. "What's the prize?" he asked, masking his intrigue with nonchalance. Jack grinned, raising his champagne glass. $1 million, but here's the catch. You have to marry her and stay married for at least 6 months. The room buzzed with the thrill of Jack's audacity, but Lucas, always eager to prove himself, agreed without hesitation. To him, it was just another game to win. The woman Jack had in mind, however, was not what Lucas was expecting. Her name was Chloe Richards, and she defied every notion of what Lucas usually found appealing. Days later, Lucas received more information about Chloe. She was confident, fiercely independent, and had a no-nonsense attitude. She didn't conform to the beauty standards Lucas typically pursued, but that only piqued his curiosity further. Used to being in control, he wondered how he would manage someone who wouldn't simply bend to his will. Their first meeting was arranged at a high-end restaurant. When Chloe arrived, Lucas immediately noticed her striking confidence. She wasn't intimidated by the luxurious setting or by Lucas's reputation. Instead, she met his gaze with firm self-assurance. "You must be Lucas Marshall," Chloe said directly as she sat down. "And you must be Chloe Richards," Lucas replied with a composed smile, extending his hand. She hesitated for a moment before shaking it, her grip firm and deliberate. Her unwavering determination was apparent. Without wasting time, Chloe leaned forward. "Let's not beat around the bush," she began, her tone straightforward. "I know about the bet, the terms, and the conditions." Lucas was momentarily surprised by her bluntness, but didn't let it show. "And yet, you still agreed to meet," he replied, intrigued by her motivations. Chloe paused thoughtfully before answering. "Let's just say I have my reasons. I'm not naive, Lucas. 6 months may seem short, but a lot can change in that time. If you think you can manipulate or control me, you're mistaken." Lucas found himself smiling, his interest in her growing. Chloe was proving to be a far greater challenge than he had anticipated. Her boldness and independence fascinated him, and as their first meeting ended, he realized she was unlike anyone he had ever met. For the first time, Lucas felt a spark of something beyond competition: admiration. Days passed, and Lucas couldn't shake thoughts of Chloe. Used to always being the master of the game, he now found himself strategizing for their next meeting. He was determined to understand her better and figure out why she had agreed to this unusual arrangement. Their second meeting was held at a simple cafe, a sharp contrast to the opulence Lucas typically favored. Chloe had suggested the spot, and Lucas, intrigued, agreed. He wanted to uncover more about her motivations and who she really was. When he arrived, Chloe was already seated, sipping tea with a calm smile. She greeted him warmly, without the guarded coldness of their first encounter. Yet, she still carried herself with that same unshakable confidence. "I thought you preferred 5-star restaurants," Lucas remarked as he sat down, unable to hide his amusement. Chloe shrugged, her smile unwavering. "I do, but I wanted to show you there's more to life than extravagance." The simplicity of her answer caught him off guard. As the conversation unfolded, Lucas realized the challenge wasn't just about staying married to someone outside his comfort zone. It was about learning to see the world through a lens completely unlike his own. And with each moment, Chloe became an even greater enigma, one Lucas was eager to unravel. Chloe teased Lucas with a sly smile as he settled into the chair across from her. "Sometimes it's good to break the routine," Lucas replied, doing his best to sound casual, though the modest cafe setting felt foreign to his world of luxury. They exchanged pleasantries, sharing superficial details about their lives, but it didn't take long for Chloe to get straight to the point. "If we're really doing this, there are a few things I want to make clear," she said, setting her teacup firmly on the table. "I'm not interested in your money or your lifestyle. 6 months is 6 months, and I intend to leave this arrangement exactly as I entered it." Lucas studied her, sensing the conviction behind her words. Chloe was unlike anyone he had ever met. She wasn't drawn to wealth or social status, and it was obvious that marriage wasn't something she saw as a means to climb any ladder. "So, what do you want, Chloe?" Lucas asked, his curiosity genuine. "Freedom," she answered without hesitation. "Even though we're entering this agreement, I need you to know that you won't control me. I have my own life, and that's not going to change because of a temporary marriage." Her answer surprised him. Lucas had expected a negotiation, maybe even an attempt to leverage his wealth or influence. Instead, Chloe's desire for independence intrigued him. "Fine," he agreed with a calm smile. 6 months. After that, we go our separate ways." Chloe watched him closely, as if testing his sincerity. She had her own plan for how this would play out and was determined to ensure it followed her terms. Deep down, she knew Lucas might try to manipulate the situation, but she trusted her own strength to resist. Their meeting ended on a polite, even friendly note. Both left with their roles clearly defined. Chloe would hold firm to her independence, and Lucas would treat this marriage as nothing more than a formality to win the bet. Yet, as the wedding date approached, Lucas began to sense that this game might not be as simple as he had first imagined. The wedding itself was cold and transactional, more like signing a contract than celebrating a union. Lucas, ever the strategist, already saw himself as the inevitable winner. 6 months, he thought, would pass quickly. He was confident that Chloe, no matter how stubborn, would eventually succumb to the allure of the lavish lifestyle he would offer her. After the ceremony, Lucas brought Chloe to his penthouse, a towering masterpiece of glass and steel overlooking New York City. It was a monument to his wealth, with enormous windows that reflected the shimmering lights of the skyline and interiors adorned with the most exclusive and expensive decor. To Lucas, this was the real battleground where he would triumph, using the power of his material world to win Chloe over. But the moment Chloe stepped inside, she made it clear that she wasn't impressed. Her posture was composed, her expression distant. She scanned the luxurious penthouse, but remained unfazed by its grandeur. Walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows, she gazed at the city below, the glow of its lights illuminating her face. 6 months, Lucas, not a day more, she said firmly, her voice unyielding. Lucas smiled, confident in his usual charm. He had faced resistance before. Every woman in his life had initially resisted, but eventually, they all surrendered to his wealth, his charisma, or both. He was certain this time would be no different. What Lucas didn't realize, however, was that Chloe wasn't like anyone else. She had no interest in the trappings of his world, and while Lucas believed this was still just a game to win, Chloe was quietly rewriting the rules. Lucas believed Chloe would eventually fall in line, like everyone else before her, or so he thought. In the days following their wedding, he tried every tactic to impress her. Lavish gifts, from dazzling jewelry to designer wardrobes, and luxurious trips were all presented with the expectation that Chloe would eventually embrace the lifestyle he dictated. Yet, to Lucas's frustration, she refused it all. "I don't need these things, Lucas," Chloe would say, her voice steady and calm, which only fueled his irritation further. For the first time, Lucas, a man who always got what he wanted, was facing someone who wouldn't bend to his will. It wasn't just about the bet anymore, it became personal. Lucas needed to win her over to prove he was still in control. Frustrated by her resistance, Lucas decided to play harder. He started subtly interfering with her life. He discouraged her from going to work, using excuses like, "You don't need a paycheck anymore," or "Your role as my wife is more important." When Chloe pushed back, he made her wait hours for meetings she deemed important, manipulating schedules and situations to assert his dominance. But Chloe stood firm. She refused to let Lucas control her life, which only deepened his obsession to break through her defenses. Their relationship became increasingly tense, a battleground filled with small provocations. Lucas's attempts to assert his power were met with sharp, calculated responses from Chloe, who refused to feel inferior. One particularly heated night, Lucas tried a new approach. His voice softened, but his frustration was evident. "I don't understand you, Chloe," he said, his gaze locked on her. "Any other woman would be thrilled to live in this kind of luxury. But you act like it's not enough. What do you really want?" Chloe, who had been silent until then, finally looked up. Her eyes gleamed with a fierce intensity that Lucas hadn't expected. "What do I want?" "Respect, Lucas. I'm not a piece on your chessboard. You think money and power can control me, but you're wrong. Money doesn't buy dignity or integrity. You have all of this," she gestured around the room, "but inside, you're empty, and that's what you can't stand." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. For the first time, Lucas felt as if he might be losing something greater than control. Chloe wasn't just resisting him. She was unraveling the carefully crafted facade he'd spent years building. The fact that she could see beyond his wealth and power left him feeling vulnerable, a sensation he hadn't experienced before. Instead of retreating, Lucas doubled down. He began isolating Chloe from her connections, cutting off her career opportunities and sabotaging events that were important to her. He wanted her to realize that without him, her life would be far more difficult. Yet Chloe was undeterred. With every setback, she returned stronger, holding on to her dignity and independence. Her resolve only seemed to grow. One evening, Chloe decided to confront Lucas head-on. "You think you're in control, don't you?" she said, her voice calm but laced with an edge of defiance. "But what you don't realize is that I have a plan too. And when the time comes, you'll see that this whole game you're playing is part of something much bigger than you could ever imagine." Lucas stared at her, genuinely taken aback. For the first time, he began to doubt himself. Was it possible that he had underestimated Chloe? The realization left him unsettled in a way he couldn't fully understand. As weeks passed, their dynamic grew increasingly tense, like a rope pulled taut and ready to snap. Lucas, obsessed with maintaining control, tried every trick in the book to manipulate the situation in his favor. Yet, Chloe remained steadfast, an unshakable fortress he couldn't penetrate. Every failed attempt only seemed to highlight her inner strength, leaving Lucas both frustrated and strangely admiring of her resilience. But something unexpected was happening. As time went on, Lucas began to see Chloe differently. What had started as a battle of wills turned into something more complex. It wasn't just her defiance he respected. It was her authenticity. She was doing something no one else had ever done. She was disarming him emotionally. One night, after a particularly tense argument, Lucas stood alone in his massive living room, staring out at the city skyline through the penthouse's glass windows. The shimmering lights of New York, once a source of pride and power for him, now felt hollow. He couldn't shake the questions swirling in his mind. Why did Chloe affect him so deeply? She was just supposed to be part of a 6-month bet, a pawn in his game. And yet, she had become so much more. For the first time in his life, Lucas felt something unfamiliar: vulnerability. Chloe had a way of seeing right through him, past the wealth and charm, to the person he had long tried to hide. And as he stood there, lost in his thoughts, he couldn't help but wonder, was this really still just a game, or had he already lost something far more important? Chloe continued with her usual routine, growing more distant with each passing day. It was as if she were waiting for something, an unseen moment Lucas couldn't anticipate. To him, it felt like there was an invisible wall between them, one he couldn't break through no matter how hard he tried. The uncertainty tormented him, and he couldn't decide whether it was pride or fear of losing control. But something about Chloe pulled him in, deeper than he ever expected. "You're different," Jack remarked casually during a dinner together. Jack, the very friend who had proposed the infamous bet, seemed amused by the situation. "Normally, you'd have this all figured out by now. But it looks like this woman is challenging you in a way no one else has." Lucas forced a smile, unwilling to admit the truth aloud. Jack's words hit too close to home. Something was changing, and Lucas hated the idea of being thrown off balance. That evening, determined to settle the growing turmoil in his mind, Lucas returned home ready to confront Chloe and put everything back into the framework of logic and control. As he walked into the penthouse, he found Chloe seated on the couch, deeply engrossed in a book, seemingly unaware of his presence. For a moment, he hesitated, watching her calm demeanor, before finally breaking the silence. "Can we talk?" Lucas asked, his voice cutting through the quiet that had become a regular part of their lives. Chloe looked up, closed her book with deliberate care, and fixed her eyes on him. Her gaze was serene but sharp, like she had been waiting for this moment. "Of course," she replied evenly, her tone measured. Lucas sat down across from her, struggling to find the right words. The air between them was heavy with tension. He couldn't continue treating this marriage like a simple contract. It had become far more complicated. He needed answers. "What are we doing here, Chloe?" he asked, his voice betraying an unexpected vulnerability. "This started as a game, a bet. But now, I don't know what to think anymore." Chloe held his gaze for a few moments, her expression unreadable. "I'm not playing, Lucas," she finally said, her voice calm but weighted with meaning. "I never was. From the beginning, I accepted this arrangement for reasons that have nothing to do with you. I don't care about the money, your lifestyle, or your need for control. I'm here for something bigger, and if you haven't realized that by now, maybe it's time you opened your eyes." Lucas felt an inexplicable tightness in his chest. Her words were like a puzzle he couldn't solve, and that frustrated him. He exhaled sharply, his emotions bubbling to the surface. "I know you have your secrets, Chloe," he said, his voice strained. "But what drives me crazy is that the more I try to understand you, the more I realize I'm not in control, and I hate that." He suddenly stood up, pacing the room as if trying to release the tension within himself. Chloe remained seated, her composure unshaken, her gaze following his movements. Finally, she stood and walked toward him, stopping just inches away. Lucas's heart raced at her closeness, but her calm presence unnerved him. "Lucas," she began softly, her voice almost a whisper, "this isn't about control. You've spent your life trying to dominate everything and everyone around you. But with me, you'll have to learn that control isn't always the answer. Sometimes, things just need to be what they are." Her words hung in the air like a quiet revelation. For the first time, Lucas truly looked at Chloe, not as a challenge, not as a piece in some game, but as a person. A connection he couldn't explain flickered between them, and it left him feeling exposed. "So, what do you want?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Chloe smiled faintly, a mysterious smile that sent a chill down his spine. "I want you to figure that out for yourself, Lucas," she said simply. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, alone, with his thoughts. In the days that followed, the distance between them seemed to grow even wider. Yet Lucas couldn't help but feel closer to Chloe in some strange, inexplicable way. He became obsessed with uncovering her true intentions. What was she hiding? Why had she really agreed to this arrangement? The questions consumed him, and with each passing moment, he felt like he was losing control. Not just of the situation, but of himself. What unsettled him most was the realization he didn't want to admit. Chloe was changing him. She wasn't just a figure in a bet anymore. She was someone who had found a way to shake the foundation of the life he had carefully built, and Lucas wasn't sure if he would ever be the same. Chloe carried on with her daily routine, yet with each passing day, she seemed more distant, as though she were waiting for something. Lucas could feel the weight of an invisible wall between them, an unbreakable barrier that tormented him. The idea that she could affect him so profoundly terrified him. He was a man used to control, yet he was now grappling with emotions he didn't fully understand. The 6 months of their marriage were almost over, but for Lucas, each day felt like an eternity. Sleep eluded him, his mind consumed by the lingering sense that he was on the verge of uncovering a life-altering truth. Chloe had become an enigma in his life, not just the woman he'd married on a bet, but someone who seemed to know something he couldn't grasp. The obsession to understand her consumed him, and he found himself spiraling into a relentless search for answers. He tried everything, hiring detectives, digging into her past, and following every lead he could find. But it was as if every aspect of Chloe's life had been meticulously planned. She was always 2 steps ahead, and Lucas began to suspect she had been in control of the game from the very beginning. One night, after returning late from a business meeting, Lucas noticed the light on the balcony. There she was, Chloe, sitting on a chair, gazing out over the city like a queen surveying her domain. Her presence radiated calm and authority, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within Lucas. He knew tonight was the night. She was finally going to reveal the truth, something he had been desperate to hear but simultaneously dreaded. He walked toward her, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence. Chloe didn't turn to face him immediately, her stillness adding to the heaviness in the air. It felt as though both of them were bracing for the devastating truth about to unfold. "I need answers, Chloe," Lucas said, his voice firm despite the racing of his heart. "I can't take this anymore. You have to tell me the truth." Chloe let out a slow sigh before standing. She turned to face him, and for the first time, Lucas noticed something different in her eyes. The usual calm and calculated demeanor was now laced with something fierce and unrelenting, a depth of emotion that he couldn't decipher. "The truth, Lucas," she said with a bitter smile, crossing her arms. "Do you really want the truth?" Lucas nodded without hesitation, though every second of silence made the tension nearly unbearable. He had steeled himself for her response, but nothing could have prepared him for what came next. "You have no idea who I really am," Chloe began, her voice cold and sharp. "You've spent your life seeing people as pieces on your chessboard, always in control. But this time, Lucas, you were the pawn. I've been playing this game from the start." Her words hit him like a tidal wave, shattering the illusion of control he had always clung to. He opened his mouth to respond, but Chloe didn't let him. "Do you remember the name Richards?" she asked, her tone growing sharper. "Of course you don't. People like you never do. My father owned a small company, a company that was barely surviving until you came along and destroyed it." Lucas took a step back, his mind racing to piece together the fragments of her revelation. What are you talking about?" he stammered, his voice faltering. Chloe stepped closer, her eyes burning with a mix of anger and pain. "My father, Lucas, he was an honest man, struggling to provide for his family. Then you came in and took everything. You crushed his business, his livelihood, and his spirit. He lost everything because of you. And do you know what happened after that?" Lucas stood frozen, unable to respond. "He killed himself," Chloe said, her voice breaking for the first time as tears welled in her eyes. "He couldn't take the shame, the loss, and my mother and I, we were left with nothing. While you thrived, building your empire, we sank into debt, barely able to survive." Her words were like knives cutting through him. Lucas had made so many deals, crushed so many companies in his pursuit of success, that he had never stopped to consider the consequences. But now, standing before Chloe, he was forced to confront the devastation he had caused. "Chloe," he tried to interrupt, desperation in his voice, but she raised her hand to stop him. "No," she said, her voice rising in anger. "You don't get to speak. You have no idea what you've done. You've lived your life in luxury while others suffered because of you. You took my father from me, the only family I had, and you didn't even care." Lucas was paralyzed by guilt. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his actions pressing down on him, suffocating him. He wanted to defend himself, to explain, but there were no words. He had no defense. "I planned everything," Chloe continued, her tone steadying but still charged with resentment. "When I heard about your bet, I saw my chance. I approached you on purpose. I accepted the marriage because I wanted you to feel even a fraction of what I felt. To know what it's like to be manipulated, powerless, and played." Lucas trembled as the realization sank in. He had been a pawn in Chloe's game all along. The man who prided himself on always being in control was now at the mercy of someone far more calculating than he had ever imagined. "Chloe," he began weakly, I didn't know." "No, Lucas," she interrupted, stepping closer until they were face to face. "You didn't know because you never cared. You destroyed lives without a second thought, and now I'm here to make sure you never forget what you did. I don't want to destroy you, Lucas. I want you to live with this, to feel the pain you caused. That pain will haunt you for the rest of your life." Her words landed like a sentence, final and unyielding. Lucas stood there, hollow and broken, as the weight of her truth settled over him. For the first time, Lucas Marshall, the man who always won, realized he had lost. And this time, it wasn't a game. It was his soul. Lucas was confronted with something he had never faced before: the real and crushing consequences of his actions. The weight of guilt pressed down on him, unrelenting, and he knew in that moment he had lost far more than a bet. He had lost something he could never recover, something that felt irreplaceable. Chloe stepped away, her silence filling the vast expanse of the penthouse. Lucas felt his legs give out, and he sank onto the couch, his body heavy with the emptiness left behind. He was speechless, his mind swirling with no answers, only questions. Her words replayed in his head like a relentless storm, each sentence dismantling the foundation of the life he thought he had built. The woman he had dismissed as a pawn in his game had turned the entire board upside down. For the first time, Lucas was truly out of control. He didn't know how to react, how to recover. The man who had always dictated the terms was now left fumbling in the dark, unable to grasp the enormity of what had happened. Chloe gave him no time to process. After delivering the brutal truth about her father's destruction and her family's suffering, she walked away, leaving Lucas alone to face the suffocating weight of his guilt. He sat in the oppressive silence of the penthouse, feeling as though everything around him was falling apart. He wanted to call her back, to explain, to apologize, but no words came to him. How could he possibly justify the harm he had caused? How could he make sense of something so cruel? In the days following Chloe's revelation, she did exactly what Lucas feared most. She ignored him completely. Her presence in the house was a constant reminder of his failure, yet she acted as if he were invisible. She walked past him without a glance, her demeanor cold and distant, treating him as though he didn't exist. At breakfast, she would sit in silence, barely acknowledging him. When he tried to speak, his words faltered and died, unable to break through the wall she had built between them. Lucas, who had always commanded attention and respect, who was used to being the center of every room, now found himself ignored in his own home. The absence of recognition, of even the smallest acknowledgement, was unbearable. Chloe went about her day with quiet purpose. She spoke to the staff, managed her personal affairs, and carried herself with the same confidence she had always exuded. But with Lucas, it was as if he wasn't even there. The forced silence ate away at him, unraveling the man he had once believed himself to be. One morning, as she prepared to leave, Lucas finally broke. "Chloe," he called out, his voice laced with desperation. "We need to talk." She stopped, standing still with her back to him as she adjusted her coat. The moment stretched out, the air between them heavy with tension. Lucas held his breath, waiting for her to respond, hoping for anything, a word, a look. Even anger would have been better than the cold indifference she was giving him. But Chloe said nothing. She remained silent, and after a brief pause, she walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out. The sound of the door closing gently behind her echoed in Lucas's mind, a stark reminder of the void that now existed between them. Lucas stood there, the pain of being ignored cutting deeper than he expected. For the first time, he realized that Chloe wasn't just an adversary or a challenge to overcome. She had become something more, something he couldn't quite define, and the thought of losing that, of losing her, was a pain he didn't know how to endure. Lucas was a man who thrived on control, someone who always had the upper hand, but now he was the one being manipulated, punished by silence and disdain. Every time Chloe left him standing alone, the feeling of powerlessness deepened. And this was only the beginning. Chloe didn't just stop at ignoring him. She began chipping away at his confidence in subtle but excruciating ways. At work, Lucas noticed meetings being rescheduled without notice. Key decisions he'd made suddenly questioned, and projects he had spearheaded mysteriously failing. Though she never admitted it, Lucas was certain Chloe was behind it all. He felt her influence in every misstep, like she was pulling invisible strings to unravel the life he'd built. At home, things grew even worse. Chloe's disdain for him became deliberate and pointed. She refused to sit with him at meals, avoided any meaningful conversation, and brushed off his attempts at reconciliation with icy silence. Whenever Lucas followed her, hoping to talk and mend things, Chloe responded with cold looks, treating his presence like an inconvenience. One evening, Lucas found her sitting in the living room, calmly reading a book. The scene appeared peaceful, but he knew better. That tranquility felt like a trap, a moment where the silence carried more weight than words. Determined, he sat on the couch across from her, his voice low and almost pleading. "Chloe," he began, searching for the right words. "I know I've done terrible things. I know I've caused you so much pain. But please, can we try to fix this? Can we at least talk?" Chloe closed her book slowly, still not looking at him. When she finally raised her eyes, her gaze was colder than he had ever seen, sending a chill through him. "Talk?" she repeated, letting out a bitter laugh. "You think there's anything left to say? You want words, Lucas? After everything you've done, words are meaningless." "I was wrong, Chloe," Lucas insisted, standing now and moving closer to her, desperate for any sign of connection. "I'll do anything to make it right. I swear, I can change." Her piercing stare stopped him in his tracks. It was as if she were testing his resolve, daring him to prove his sincerity. Slowly, Chloe stood, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Change?" she said, her tone sharp with disbelief. "Do you think changing now will erase everything? Will it bring my father back? Will it undo the years of suffering my family endured because of you? No, Lucas. It won't." She stepped closer, and Lucas felt himself shrink under the weight of her gaze. "What you do now isn't for me. It's for you. You'll carry this guilt, this weight, for the rest of your life." For the first time, Lucas stood in silence, realizing there would be no quick redemption, no easy forgiveness. He wanted to fight for something that could be fixed, but he saw now that Chloe was beyond repair. What he had broken couldn't simply be mended. In the days that followed, Chloe's coldness only intensified. Every glance she gave him was filled with disdain, and her indifference stung more deeply than anger ever could. Lucas's frustration began to morph into desperation. He tried in every way to show her that he was changing, that he was trying to be better, but every effort was met with indifference, or worse, sarcasm. One night, after a particularly disastrous day at work, where yet another major project had been mysteriously sabotaged, Lucas came home to an unbearable silence. Lucas came home one evening to the sound of Chloe laughing on the phone. At first, the light-hearted sound seemed out of place in the otherwise cold atmosphere of the penthouse. But as he listened, he caught fragments of her conversation, and what he heard made his stomach turn. She was discussing his decisions at work, subtly mocking the fallout from his recent failures. It hit him immediately. Chloe was behind it all. She was methodically dismantling everything he had built, yet in such a calculated, covert way that no one else would notice. When she hung up the phone, Lucas was already waiting for her in the living room. His face was a mask of exhaustion, frustration, and pain. He stared at her, his voice low but taut with suppressed anger. "You're tearing everything apart, aren't you?" he said. "At work, here, you're destroying my life." Chloe met his gaze with an icy calm, crossing her arms as a faint, dismissive smirk crossed her lips. "Destroying your life?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "No, Lucas. I'm simply giving back what you gave me. Don't worry, I won't ruin you financially. That would be too easy. I want you to feel it, piece by piece. I want you to watch everything you've built crumble and know it's all your fault." Her words cut through him, leaving Lucas reeling. For the first time, he felt like the ground beneath him was crumbling. He had always been the one in control, the one dictating the rules of the game. But now, he was the target of a calculated, cold revenge. Chloe wasn't looking to destroy him outright. She wanted him to suffer, to endure every small defeat, every agonizing moment of helplessness, until he was left with nothing but regret. The weeks that followed were a slow, unrelenting descent into despair. Chloe continued her campaign of indifference and subtle punishment. Lucas, once arrogant and self-assured, became a shell of his former self. He wandered through the house, a shadow of the man he used to be, desperately trying to find a way to make amends. But no matter how hard he tried, his efforts were always met with indifference, or worse, disdain. Every interaction with Chloe was a reminder of his failure. She avoided him at meals, ignored his attempts to speak, and treated him like an unwelcome ghost in his own home. Her cold, unyielding demeanor was slowly eating away at him, leaving him trapped in a cycle of guilt and pain that Chloe controlled with precision. One night, after yet another humiliating day at work, Lucas returned home to find Chloe waiting for him. This time, she didn't ignore him. Instead, she approached him as he sat on the couch, exhausted and broken. Her expression was colder than ever, and when she spoke, her words were sharper than any blow. "Lucas," she began, her voice calm but merciless, "you took something from me that I can never get back. Now, I'm returning the favor, and you'll live with that for the rest of your life." Lucas stared at her, unable to respond. Her words hung in the air, final and unforgiving. She didn't need to say anything else. The punishment was already in motion. As Chloe walked away, Lucas realized that he would never be the same. The man who once prided himself on his ability to control others had become powerless in the face of her unrelenting resolve. In the days that followed, Lucas was left to confront the depths of his despair. The weeks since Chloe's revelation had been unbearable, and the once confident man who believed he was untouchable now found himself haunted by the weight of his actions. He couldn't sleep, couldn't think of anything but the pain he had caused, and the growing realization that he couldn't fix it with words alone. But slowly, something shifted within him. Lucas began to understand that apologies meant nothing, that no amount of begging or empty promises could undo the damage he had done. If he wanted to prove himself to Chloe, he would have to show her real change, not just talk about it. One morning, Lucas woke up with a sense of determination he hadn't felt in weeks. He knew the first step was to give Chloe space, to stop pressuring her for forgiveness she wasn't ready to give. Instead, he would focus on small, meaningful actions to show her that he was trying to be better. He began to pay attention to the details of Chloe's life, the little things that mattered to her, and resolved to rebuild himself, not for her approval, but because it was the right thing to do. Lucas began to notice the small details of Chloe's life, observing her routines and preferences from a distance. He never invaded her space, but mentally took note of the things she seemed to enjoy. She loved flowers, particularly peonies. Her coffee was always strong, without sugar. These small, seemingly insignificant details now became the key to his quiet attempts at reconnection. That afternoon, Lucas visited the most prestigious flower shop in town and bought a bouquet of peonies. But instead of giving them to Chloe directly, knowing she would likely reject the gesture, he left the flowers on the kitchen table without a note. It was simple, subtle, and heartfelt. When Chloe returned from her walk, Lucas observed her discreetly. She paused in front of the flowers, her expression neutral, but he saw her pick one up and smell it. She didn't say anything, but to Lucas, it was a small victory. She hadn't ignored them. It was progress. In the days that followed, Lucas continued his small, thoughtful gestures. He made sure her coffee was prepared exactly how she liked it and set the breakfast table carefully before leaving, giving her space, but showing he cared. He left other small items she enjoyed where she would notice them, never forcing an interaction, but quietly demonstrating his effort. Chloe remained distant, the wall between them firmly in place. But Lucas didn't let that discourage him. He knew breaking through her defenses would take time, and he was committed to earning her trust and forgiveness on her terms. One particularly cold evening, Lucas found Chloe standing on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, as she gazed out at the city lights. For a moment, he hesitated, unsure whether to approach. Then, he decided to bring her a cup of tea, knowing she liked to drink something warm before bed. "Here," he said gently as he stepped onto the balcony. "I thought you might like something hot." His voice was calm, careful not to intrude. Chloe didn't respond immediately, but she accepted the cup, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. Lucas stood beside her, silent and unobtrusive, simply trying to be present. The tension between them lingered, but for the first time in weeks, it felt less suffocating. There was a shift, subtle but significant. "Why are you doing this, Lucas?" Chloe asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft but firm. Lucas took a deep breath, realizing this was his chance to speak honestly. "Because I know that words don't mean anything anymore," he admitted, his gaze following hers toward the city skyline. "My apologies can't undo the past. But I'm trying to show you that I want to change. Not just for you, but because I know I need to be better." Chloe didn't respond right away. She held the cup of tea, letting the wind carry away the weight of his words. After a moment, she finally spoke. "You can't change the past, Lucas." "I know," he replied earnestly, his voice steady. "But I can change the future." For the first time that night, Chloe turned to look at him. Her expression remained guarded, but there was a flicker of something else, perhaps curiosity or the faintest hint of consideration. Lucas knew she wasn't ready to forgive him, but this was a moment he could build on. He had shown her sincerity, and that, in itself, was a step forward. In the days that followed, Lucas continued with his quiet efforts. The energy between them began to shift, however slightly. Chloe still kept her distance, but she no longer rejected his gestures outright. She accepted the flowers, the cups of tea, and even allowed brief, superficial conversations during breakfast. The barriers she had erected were starting to lower, slowly but noticeably. Then, one evening, a moment of unexpected significance arrived. Lucas was preparing to leave for a business meeting, dressed sharply and ready to step back into the world he once dominated. As he grabbed his coat, Chloe walked into the room. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something different in her demeanor. "Can you cancel your meeting?" she asked suddenly. Lucas froze, surprised by her request. For a moment, he searched her face for a clue, unsure of what this meant. But deep down, he knew this was a turning point, a sign that she might be willing to let him in, even just a little. Chloe had never shown much interest in Lucas's comings and goings since their relationship had unraveled, so when she asked him to cancel his meeting that evening, it caught him completely off guard. For a moment, he hesitated, unsure if he had heard her correctly. But then, without questioning further, he grabbed his phone and canceled the meeting without a second thought. It was the first time in weeks that Chloe seemed willing to spend time with him, and he wasn't about to waste the opportunity. They sat on the couch, a small space of distance between them, but for the first time, the silence between them didn't feel unbearable. Chloe seemed deep in thought, as though she was processing everything that had happened over the past few months. Finally, she broke the silence. "I'm not ready to fully forgive you," she admitted, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "But you're showing me something different. I see that you're trying, and maybe that's the beginning of something." Lucas felt his chest tighten, his heart racing at her words. He knew better than to push or rush her, but this small moment was enough to reignite the hope he had been clinging to. He understood that the road ahead was still long and uncertain, but he was willing to take every step if it meant earning her forgiveness, and maybe, one day, her love. The rest of the evening passed peacefully. They talked about trivial things, avoiding the heavier subjects, but for Lucas, it felt like a victory. It was a step forward, a small but meaningful shift. Chloe was no longer completely closed off. She was beginning to let her guard down, and Lucas silently vowed not to make the mistake of underestimating her again. Still, a shadow lingered over them. Lucas could sense that Chloe hadn't revealed everything yet. There was something she was still holding back, something she hadn't shared. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was significant, and he braced himself for the moment it would come to light. The weeks following that quiet evening were a mix of tension and cautious hope. Chloe no longer treated him with the same coldness, but she hadn't fully opened up either. Their interactions were still guarded, hesitant, as though she was waiting for the right moment to speak. Lucas felt as though he was being tested, and he was determined not to fail. He dedicated himself entirely to proving he had changed. Work commitments took a back seat as he spent more time at home, making himself available without pushing or demanding anything from Chloe. Small gestures became part of their daily routine, sharing breakfast, talking about lighthearted topics in the evening. Slowly, the ice between them began to thaw. Chloe no longer looked at him with pure disdain, but Lucas could tell there was still a part of her that remained wary. Even as their relationship began to shift, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that Chloe was keeping something hidden. She avoided deeper conversations, particularly about the past or the future, as if she was waiting for the right moment to share whatever it was. And then, on a quiet, rainy night, that moment came. The soft sound of rain tapping against the penthouse windows filled the silence. Chloe sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze distant. Lucas noticed the change in her demeanor. She seemed more introspective, almost weighed down by something. His curiosity, which had been gnawing at him for weeks, finally overwhelmed him. "Chloe," he began softly, his voice hesitant, almost afraid. "I know there's still something between us. Something you haven't told me. I can feel it. Please, if there's something you're still holding back, I need to know." Chloe didn't answer immediately. She lowered her eyes, avoiding his gaze, and for a moment, Lucas thought she might shut him out again. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating, but he waited, knowing he couldn't rush her. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked at him. Her eyes, filled with pain and resolve, met his, and Lucas felt his heart tighten. "You're right," she said, her voice soft but heavy with emotion. "There is something I haven't told you, something I didn't think I could share until now, but maybe it's time." Lucas felt the air grow thick around him, every nerve in his body bracing for what was to come. Whatever it was, he knew it would change everything. He leaned forward slightly, waiting for her to continue, dreading but desperate to hear what she had to say. "Do you remember the company you destroyed?" Chloe began, her tone steady, but her expression etched with pain. "The one my father managed? I told you that you ruined our family, and that's true. But that's not all you destroyed." Lucas's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. Chloe looked away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She took another deep breath, struggling to steady her voice. When she finally spoke again, it was barely a whisper. "I was pregnant, Lucas." Her words hit him like a crushing weight. Lucas blinked, struggling to process what Chloe had just said. Her words hung in the air, almost unreal. "What?" he whispered, stunned. Chloe kept her gaze fixed on the floor. "I was pregnant at the time," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "When everything fell apart, when we lost everything, and my father was gone, the pressure, the stress, I lost the baby." Lucas felt as if the ground beneath him had vanished. His chest tightened, and breathing became nearly impossible. The weight of her revelation hit him like a blow to the stomach. He had thought the guilt he'd carried these past weeks couldn't get any worse, but now it multiplied, consuming him. He hadn't just destroyed a business or a family, he had destroyed a life. "Chloe," he tried to speak, but his voice cracked. I never could have imagined." Finally, Chloe looked up at him, her tears flowing freely now. Even with her face marked by pain, there was a strength in her that made Lucas feel small. "No, you didn't know," she said, her voice filled with hurt and anger. "Because you never cared to know. You destroyed lives, Lucas. You never stopped to look at the people in your way. I lost my baby, and you went on with your life as if nothing had happened." Her words cut deeper than anything Lucas had ever experienced. He wanted to do something, anything, to fix the devastation he had caused, but he knew nothing he could say or do would erase what Chloe had endured. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't have the words. What I did is unforgivable, and I'll never forgive myself for it. But please, Chloe, I'll do anything, to try to make this right." Chloe held his gaze, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Lucas's desperation to find a way to ease her pain was palpable, but he knew that no words could undo the past. Finally, Chloe took a deep breath and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her expression had shifted slightly. The pain was still there, but there was something else too, something Lucas couldn't quite define. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Lucas," she said, her voice steady but laced with raw emotion. "What you did, what happened, it was devastating. But," she paused, as though choosing her words carefully, "I can see that you're trying. And maybe there's a chance that one day I can find a way to move forward. But it won't be easy. It won't be quick." Lucas nodded, feeling a complicated mix of hope and despair. He knew the road ahead would be long and grueling, but the fact that Chloe was even willing to consider a future, any future, gave him the strength to keep going. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "No matter how long it takes, I'll prove to you that I've changed, that I can be someone you trust, someone you can, maybe, one day, forgive." Chloe studied him for a moment, her expression softening ever so slightly. There was no full forgiveness in her eyes, no promise of resolution, but there was an opening, a small glimmer of possibility. "We'll see," she said with a faint sigh. "We'll see if you can." She stood and walked toward the door, leaving Lucas alone on the couch. But this time, the silence she left behind didn't feel as crushing as before. For the first time, Lucas felt a flicker of hope. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but at least now there was something to work toward. The days following Chloe's revelation were transformative for Lucas. Every word she had spoken stayed with him, weighing heavily on his conscience. The guilt that had been consuming him didn't paralyze him anymore. It became his fuel for change. He didn't just want to earn Chloe's forgiveness. He wanted to become someone deserving of it. He wanted to be a man she could respect, not just for her sake, but for everyone he had hurt during his ruthless climb to the top. That morning, Lucas made a decision. He wouldn't let his past define him forever. He would take action to repair the damage he had caused as much as he could. He began reaching out to the people whose lives he had impacted, starting with those whose businesses he had destroyed. The first visit was to the family of a man whose company Lucas had crushed years ago. He arrived unannounced at a modest house in a neighborhood far removed from the luxury he was used to. When the door opened, Lucas found himself face to face with a stranger, a man whose pain was etched deeply in his eyes. Lucas cleared his throat, his voice unsteady but sincere. "I'm Lucas Marshall," he began. Lucas's voice was filled with a sincerity he hardly recognized in himself. "I'm here to apologize," he said. The man at the door stared at him, disbelief clear in his eyes. "Apologize," he repeated, letting out a bitter laugh. "What's that going to change now?" "I can't change the past," Lucas replied, his tone steady. "But I can try to help rebuild the future. I'm here to offer compensation, to help fix what I destroyed." The man didn't respond immediately. His expression caught somewhere between anger and confusion. It was a reaction Lucas would face again and again over the coming weeks as he continued his journey of redemption. He knocked on doors, met with families whose lives he had upended, and offered not just money, but also his time and effort. He listened to their stories, trying to truly understand the depth of the harm he had caused. It wasn't just about restitution, it was about transformation. Lucas began donating significant sums to small businesses that had been crushed by his ruthless corporate strategies. He set up recovery programs to help struggling entrepreneurs rebuild. Each act of restitution was a step toward redemption, though he knew it could never fully erase the pain he had caused. Chloe observed all of this from a distance. At first, she remained skeptical, cautious of Lucas's motives. She had seen him make promises before, only to break them. But as days turned into weeks, and Lucas's actions consistently reflected genuine change, she began to feel something unexpected: renewed respect and even admiration. He wasn't just speaking empty words anymore. He was proving that he was willing to do the hard work of change. One evening, as Chloe stood on the balcony watching the city lights, Lucas quietly joined her. He had just returned from another reconciliation visit, and his expression was calm, yet tired from the emotional weight of his efforts. "How was it today?" Chloe asked, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. Lucas sighed deeply, the exhaustion in his voice evident. "It was tough," he admitted, "but it was necessary. Every conversation, every apology, it's a step, not just for you, but for me too. I need to become better." Finally, Chloe turned to look at him. For the first time, the hardness in her gaze seemed to have softened. The anger and pain she had carried for so long didn't seem as sharp. In that moment, she saw someone different from the arrogant man who had once entered her life on a whim. She saw someone fighting to be better. "I can see that," she said softly. "And I think I'm ready to try. Maybe it's time we leave the past behind and see if we can build something new." Lucas felt a wave of relief wash over him, so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. Her words meant more than he could have imagined. She was willing to give them a chance, not as a couple bound by a bet, but as two people starting fresh. As their 6-month agreement came to an end, something unexpected began to happen. Lucas and Chloe grew closer. Their conversations became more natural, less burdened by the weight of their past. They shared moments of laughter and quiet connection, and slowly, love began to blossom in a way neither of them had anticipated. On the final night of their agreement, Lucas prepared a special dinner. He knew this moment would be pivotal. They had come so far, and he didn't want their journey together to end. During the meal, his nervousness was evident as he finally spoke. "Chloe," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I know our agreement is almost over, but I don't want this to end. I don't want us to end. I've fallen in love with you, truly, and I want us to continue, but this time as a real couple. No bets, No games? Just us. Chloe looked at him, surprised by the raw sincerity in his words. She realized that she felt something for him too, something that had quietly grown over the past few weeks. "I love you too, Lucas," she said, her voice gentle yet certain. "And I want to try. I want to build something real with you, but this time as equals." Those words marked a turning point for them both. They had overcome obstacles that once seemed insurmountable, and now they were ready to move forward together. Months later, Chloe began to notice subtle changes in her body: morning nausea, fatigue. After a doctor's visit, her suspicions were confirmed. She was pregnant. When she told Lucas, his reaction was pure joy. He embraced her, tears streaming down his face, laughing and crying at the same time. "Everything we've been through, it's all led us to this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to do this right this time, Chloe. I want to marry you again, but for real this time. Not because of a bet, not for any other reason than that I love you and want to spend my life with you." Chloe smiled, her own tears falling as she nodded. "I want that too, Lucas. This time, it'll be a real wedding, a fresh start." Their new wedding was an intimate affair, attended by close friends and family. There was no extravagant display, no superficial glamour, just Lucas and Chloe, united by love and a shared determination to build a better future. Lucas knew his journey of redemption was far from over. He still had a long road ahead, making amends for the lives he had impacted. But now, he had something to fight for: a life with the woman he loved and the child they were expecting. As they danced together at the end of the ceremony, Chloe rested her head on Lucas's chest and whispered, "Who would have thought it all started with a bet?" Lucas smiled, holding her close. "Who would have thought it'd turn out to be the best bet I ever made?" With their future full of love, hope, and redemption, they were ready to begin the next chapter of their lives together. What do you think? Did Chloe make the right choice in forgiving Lucas? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt narratives like this. Thank you for watching.